My mom texted emergency family meeting or we're done forever, until I walked into 26 relatives, a PowerPoint explaining why I'm a failure, and 60 days ultimatum. But my countermove was already in motion, and it left them all visibly pale. I, 28 male, and yeah, I was still living at home. But here's the thing, everyone conveniently forgets I wasn't some basement-dwelling loser playing video games all day. I've got a degree in finance from a decent state school. Not Harvard Business School, but not some diploma mill either. Graduated with a 3.6 GPA and minimal student debt because I worked retail every summer and saved every single penny instead of blowing it on spring break trips like most of my classmates. The problem was timing. I graduated right into the economic mess of 2020 when everything went sideways and finance jobs dried up overnight. Spent 2 years applying for entry-level analyst positions while working at a sporting goods store to pay off what little debt I had and help with household expenses. Finally landed a position at a regional bank doing loan analysis for $46,000. Not amazing money, but honest work with good benefits and real room for advancement. I was living at home specifically to save money for a house down payment. Had about $34,000 saved up in a high-yield savings account and was aiming for $50,000 before buying my first place. My parents said they were proud of my financial discipline and long-term thinking. They bragged to neighbors about how responsible and mature I was being, or at least they did until 3 months ago when everything changed overnight. My sister Jessica, 26 female, married to this guy named Brandon who sells insurance and somehow thinks that makes him Warren Buffett. She's got a marketing degree from a decent school that she's never actually used because Brandon allegedly makes enough for both of them to live comfortably. She drives a BMW X3 that she definitely can't afford on their actual income, and constantly posts Instagram stories from expensive restaurants and shopping trips that cost more than I make in a week. My brother Mike is 24, works in sales at a big electronics store and lives with his girlfriend in an apartment complex that honestly looks like it was built during the Carter administration and hasn't been updated since. He's always going on about his investment strategies and building wealth through alternative methods, which, from what I can tell, involves a lot of cryptocurrency day trading and various get-rich-quick schemes he finds on YouTube. My dad runs a small landscaping business, just him, and usually 2 to 3 seasonal workers, depending on the contracts he can get. It was doing reasonably well for years. Nothing spectacular but steady income. Lately, though, he's been increasingly stressed about changing market conditions and rising equipment costs, and customers wanting to pay less for more work. My mom works part-time at a medical office doing billing and insurance claims, maybe 25 hours a week. So when my phone started going absolutely crazy last Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing loan applications and credit reports at work, I naturally figured someone was in the hospital or there had been some kind of serious emergency. 3 missed calls from my mom in 10 minutes, followed by increasingly urgent text messages. When I finally stepped away from my desk to call her back, she sounded weird. Not panicked like I expected, but almost excited in a really uncomfortable way. "Danny, you need to come home right now. We're having an emergency family meeting, and everyone's already here waiting for you." What kind of emergency? Is someone hurt? Did something happen to Grandpa? Just get here as fast as you can. You have 20 minutes or we're making this decision without you. And trust me, you want to be here for this. The 15-minute drive home was incredibly nerve-wracking. I kept running through possibilities in my head. Someone died. Someone was seriously ill. Financial emergency, legal trouble. I couldn't think of any family decision that would need to be made so urgently that they couldn't wait for me to properly finish my workday and drive home safely. I pulled into our driveway and it looked like a family reunion or a funeral. Jessica's white BMW X3, Mike's red Mustang, which he also definitely can't afford on his sales commissions. My uncle's pickup truck, both sets of grandparents' cars, cousins I barely see except at major holidays. I counted 12 vehicles crammed into our driveway and parked along the street in front of our house. Walking into that house was like entering a courtroom where I was obviously the defendant. 26 family members sitting in a perfect semicircle formation around our living room and dining room. Every chair from both rooms had been moved to create this setup. People were sitting on the stairs on folding chairs brought in from the garage. My spot, a single chair positioned in the center facing everyone else, was the only empty seat in the entire arrangement. The room went dead quiet when I walked through the front door. Not normal family gathering quiet where conversations just naturally fade, but hostile, uncomfortable quiet, like I'd interrupted something very important. And everyone was annoyed that I'd finally shown up. My dad stood up from his position at the front of the group, holding a laptop computer and a thick manila folder. His expression was serious and formal in a way I'd never seen before. "Sit down, Danny. We need to have a very important conversation about your future. I've been to a couple of interventions for friends with serious problems, so I recognized the setup immediately, but that didn't make sense. I don't do anything destructive. Don't have any kind of addiction or harmful behavior. What could this possibly be about?" "Danny," my dad started opening his folder and pulling out what looked like printed charts and graphs. "You're 28 years old. You're living in our house, eating our food, using our utilities, taking up space and contributing almost nothing meaningful to this family's overall success and reputation." "Wait, what?" "I pay $400 a month in rent, plus my own car insurance, phone bill, and most of my own food. I help with yard work and household maintenance." "What is he talking about?" "Your sister Jessica has built a beautiful, successful life with Brandon. They just purchased a $340,000 house in Maple Ridge and are already talking seriously about starting a family and building generational wealth. Your brother Mike is launching his own investment business and has already generated over $15,000 in profit just this quarter from his cryptocurrency and trading strategies." I glanced over at Mike, who couldn't make eye contact with me. $15,000 in profit. This is the same guy who borrowed $800 from me 6 months ago because he couldn't make rent after a temporary setback in his trading account. Meanwhile, Dad continued, his voice getting more stern and disappointed. "You're working at a small regional bank making $46,000 per year in what amounts to an entry-level position with no clear prospects for meaningful advancement, no girlfriend or romantic prospects, no ambition to improve your situation. You're actively dragging down this family's reputation in the community." That's when Jessica stood up from her position in the semicircle. And this is where things went from uncomfortable to absolutely brutal. "Danny, do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when my friends and Brandon's colleagues see you working at that little neighborhood bank branch? They ask me why my brother is stuck in some dead-end clerical job instead of actually using his expensive college degree for something impressive. I constantly have to make excuses for you and change the subject." "I'm not in a clerical position, Jessica. I'm a loan analyst. It's a professional role that requires my finance degree." "Loan analyst isn't real finance," she snapped back with obvious disdain. "Brandon explained it to me. That's just paperwork processing with a fancy title to make you feel better. Real finance professionals at real companies make 6-figure salaries and have actual responsibility." Then Mike jumped in, finally looking at me. "My girlfriend's little sister goes to school with some kids whose parents know you, and she asked why Uncle Danny always looks so tired and stressed out all the time. I honestly didn't know what to tell her. It's like you've completely given up on having any kind of successful life." My mom was crying at this point, but it was angry crying, not sad crying. The kind of tears that come with frustration and disappointment rather than grief. "We have supported you financially and emotionally for 28 years, Danny, 28 years. And this is what we get in return. You were supposed to be our success story, our proof that we raised our children right. Instead, you're just existing, taking up space, going through the motions of life without any real purpose or ambition." That's when my Uncle Bob stood up and opened the laptop computer he'd been holding. "We've prepared a comprehensive presentation to help you understand exactly where you stand compared to your peers and what needs to change immediately." A PowerPoint presentation. They made an actual PowerPoint presentation about my life. I genuinely wish I was making this up, but I'm not. The title slide displayed on our big screen TV read, "Danny's Quarter-Life Crisis. A comprehensive analysis of underachievement and required corrective actions." Slide 1, Income Comparison Analysis. A chart showing Jessica and Brandon's combined household income, $89,000. Mike's projected annual earnings, $67,000. And my salary, $46,000, highlighted in red as below acceptable standards. Slide 2, Living Situation Benchmarking. Statistics showing that 89% of college-educated men my age live independently, with a pie chart breaking down different living arrangements and a red arrow pointing to lives with parents labeled as Danny's current situation. Slide 3, Relationship Status Evaluation. An actual timeline of my dating history over the past 5 years with analysis points about why each relationship ended and what this indicates about my personal development and social skills. Slide 4, Financial Contribution Analysis. Detailed charts showing that I'm the only adult child still financially dependent on my parents, with calculations of household expenses and my inadequate contribution relative to my income. Slide 5, Professional Development Trajectory, a comparison chart showing career advancement timelines for successful family members versus my stagnant position with projections showing I'll never achieve financial independence at current pace. Slide 6, the intervention plan and ultimatum. Daniel has exactly 60 days from today to secure employment paying a minimum of $75,000 annually and establish independent housing arrangements, or he will be permanently removed from all family activities, holiday celebrations, and inheritance considerations. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Uncle Bob looked directly at me with what I think he believed was tough love, but felt like pure hostility. We took a formal vote before you arrived today, Danny. It was unanimous. All 26 family members present agreed that you need this wake-up call to finally start living up to your potential. I sat there for what felt like forever trying to process what had just happened. 26 family members had spent weeks, maybe months, planning this elaborate intervention. They'd created a professional presentation complete with research and statistics about why I'm a failure. Then they'd voted to essentially disown me if I don't meet their arbitrary income requirement in exactly 2 months. Does anyone want to hear my perspective on why I'm still living at home? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We don't need to hear excuses, Jessica said dismissively. We need to see results and meaningful changes in your behavior. I'm not making excuses. I'm saving money for a house down payment. I have $34,000 in savings right now. I was planning to buy a place within the next year once I hit my $50,000 target. $34,000? Brandon actually laughed out loud. Danny, that's barely enough for a down payment on a decent car, let alone a house worth living in. That's when something fundamental clicked in my brain. These people weren't trying to help me or motivate me to improve my life. They were trying to humiliate me in front of the entire extended family. This wasn't an intervention, it was a public execution designed to make them feel better about their own problems. I stood up slowly and looked around the room at all 26 faces staring at me expectantly, waiting for me to break down, apologize, promise to change, beg for forgiveness, and another chance. Instead, I smiled and said, "Okay, I accept your challenge, but when I succeed, and I will succeed, every single one of you is going to regret this day for the rest of your lives." Then I walked out. No dramatic door slamming, no shouting, no emotional breakdown, just left quietly and drove away. I went straight to my best friend Tyler's apartment. He's been my closest friend since high school and knows my family well enough to understand the dynamics. When I told him what had just happened, his immediate reaction was, "What is wrong with your family? That's insane." Tyler let me crash on his couch while I figured out my next move, which honestly was incredibly generous since his place is tiny and he's got his own life to worry about. The first thing I did was start applying aggressively for every finance job I could find. But I also started thinking carefully about what I'd observed during that intervention. Something felt really off about the whole situation. Why now? Why such an aggressive formal ultimatum? Why the elaborate PowerPoint presentation instead of just having a normal family conversation about their concerns? I started thinking about the financial situations of the people who'd been most vocal during the intervention. Jessica's BMW payments had to be astronomical. Those things lease for $500 plus per month minimum. Mike's investment profits seemed highly suspicious, given that he'd asked to borrow money from me relatively recently. And my dad's landscaping business had clearly been struggling more than he'd been letting on, based on stress levels and comments I'd overheard. I decided to do some serious research into what was really going on with my family's finances. First stop, Jessica's social media presence. Her Instagram account was an absolute goldmine of financial irresponsibility and lifestyle inflation. Multiple posts per week showing dinners at restaurants that cost $200 plus per person for her and Brandon. Shopping trips with bags from Nordstrom, Kate Spade, and other stores I couldn't afford to walk into. Weekend trips to expensive resorts and spas. All of it posted with captions like "Blessed life, living our best life," and "Grateful for abundance." But here's the thing that didn't add up. Brandon sells insurance for a regional company. Even good insurance salespeople in our area typically max out around $60,000 annually. Even if Jessica was working full-time, which she's not, their combined legitimate income couldn't possibly support the lifestyle documented on her social media. I started digging deeper into public records and information that's legally available to anyone who knows where to look. Property records showed they'd bought their $340,000 house with only a 3% down payment, meaning they borrowed over $330,000. And were immediately underwater on the mortgage. The BMW wasn't owned, it was leased at what had to be an enormous monthly payment. I also discovered they'd taken out a home equity line of credit less than 6 months after buying the house. Tyler works in banking and was able to help me understand some of the credit reporting information that's accessible through legitimate channels. Without violating anyone's privacy or doing anything illegal, we could see that Jessica and Brandon were maxed out on at least 7 different credit cards and had multiple personal loans from online lenders, the kind with really high interest rates that people use when banks won't lend to them anymore. Mike's situation was even more problematic once I started paying attention. His investment profits appeared to be connected to a cryptocurrency scheme that I recognized as a pump-and-dump operation after doing some research. The $15,000 he'd claimed to have made during the intervention was apparently money he'd borrowed from 3 different family members, including our grandparents, promising to double their investment within 6 months. But the most shocking discovery came when I stopped by my dad's business office to pick up some tools I'd left there, after helping him with a project a few weeks earlier. He wasn't there when I arrived, so I ended up talking with his longtime secretary while I looked for my stuff. She's worked for him for 15 years and has always been really friendly with our family. But she looked incredibly stressed and mentioned in passing that they'd had to let both of their full-time employees go last month. "Is business really that slow?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "It's not just slow, Danny. We haven't landed a single new contract in over 6 weeks. Your dad's been bidding existing jobs at barely above cost just to keep the lights on and pay basic expenses." That's when I noticed the stack of official-looking notices on her desk. Past due bills, collection notices, and what looked like legal documents. I couldn't read the details without being inappropriate, but I could see enough to understand that my dad's business was in serious financial trouble. The pieces started coming together in my mind. My family wasn't genuinely concerned about my success or personal development. They were all facing their own financial disasters and desperately needed a scapegoat to blame for their problems. Over the next 2 weeks, I applied for jobs with an intensity and focus I'd never had before and managed to get interviews with 3 different companies. But I also continued quietly investigating my family's real financial situation. And what I discovered was so much worse than I'd initially thought. The breakthrough in my understanding came when I randomly ran into my cousin Tom at a coffee shop downtown. Tom's an accountant who handles bookkeeping for several small businesses in the area, including my dad's landscaping company. We got to talking, and after some casual conversation, Tom accidentally let slip some information that he probably shouldn't have shared. "Your dad's been asking around to see if anyone might be interested in buying the business," Tom mentioned. "But honestly, there's not much to buy except debt at this point." "How bad is it?" I asked. Tom looked uncomfortable. "I probably shouldn't be discussing this, but since your family, Danny, your dad is 3 months behind on his business loan payments and facing bankruptcy. The house has been remortgaged twice, and your parents are struggling to make even the reduced payments." That night I called my Uncle Bob. He's my dad's older brother and runs a successful electrical contracting business. We'd always gotten along well, and he'd seemed genuinely uncomfortable during the intervention, like he hadn't fully understood what he was signing up for. "Uncle Bob, can I ask you something honestly? What was that intervention meeting really supposed to accomplish?" There was a long pause. "Danny, your parents asked everyone to participate in a family meeting about your future. They said you were struggling with direction and needed support from everyone to help you reach your potential. None of us knew it was going to be so formal and harsh. Did you know they were planning to essentially disown me if I don't meet their income requirement?" "What?" "No, absolutely not. They told everyone we were having a career planning session to brainstorm ways to help you find better opportunities." This was a crucial revelation. My parents had systematically lied to most of the extended family about the actual purpose of the meeting. They'd told people we were having a supportive career development session to help me achieve my goals, not a hostile intervention with ultimatums and threats. Uncle Bob was genuinely upset when I explained what had actually happened. "That's not what any of us agreed to participate in. Danny, I thought we were there to encourage and support you, not to threaten and humiliate you." Over the following week, I had similar conversations with several other family members who'd been present at the intervention. The consistent story was that my parents had misrepresented the meeting's purpose to get people to attend. Most of them thought they were coming to a positive family gathering focused on helping me explore career options. But this raised an obvious question. Why had my parents orchestrated such an elaborate deception? The answer became clear when I finally landed a job interview that went exceptionally well. The position was senior financial analyst at a much larger company with significantly more responsibility and growth potential. They initially offered me $72,000, which was still just under my family's arbitrary $75,000 threshold. I negotiated professionally and managed to get them up to $78,000 plus better benefits and a company car allowance. Suddenly, I had exactly what my family had demanded: a job paying well over $75,000 annually. I could go back to them and shove their ultimatum right back in their faces. But that felt too easy and didn't address the fundamental problem. They'd humiliated me in front of 26 people with a professionally prepared PowerPoint presentation. They'd lied to extended family members to manipulate them into participating. They'd created an elaborate charade to avoid taking responsibility for their own financial failures. Simply getting the job they demanded felt like letting them off the hook too easily. They deserved to face some real consequences for what they'd done. That's when I started developing a plan that would turn the tables completely and give them a taste of their own medicine. With my new job starting in 3 weeks, I had time to conduct a thorough investigation into my family's actual financial situation. What I discovered was far worse than even my most pessimistic expectations. My dad's landscaping business wasn't just struggling. It was functionally bankrupt and had been for months. He owed $52,000 in back taxes to the IRS, $28,000 to various suppliers and contractors, and was 3 months behind on an $85,000 business loan that was secured by both his business equipment and our family home. Most of his landscaping equipment was financed through separate loans and was about to be repossessed due to missed payments. My parents' house situation was even more dire than I'd realized. They'd bought the house outright 15 years ago when Dad's business was thriving but had systematically borrowed against it during slow periods. They now had a $190,000 mortgage after 2 separate refinancing events and were currently 2 months behind on payments with foreclosure proceedings already initiated by the bank. Jessica and Brandon's financial situation was a complete house of cards that could collapse at any moment. The $340,000 house Jessica had bragged about during the intervention. They'd put down exactly $10,200, the absolute minimum required, and were already $18,000 behind on mortgage payments after less than a year of ownership. The BMW lease was costing them $540 per month, which was absolutely insane given their actual household income. They owed $38,000 on 8 different credit cards, had taken out a $28,000 personal loan at 19% annual interest, and had borrowed an additional $15,000 from Brandon's parents under false pretenses. Mike's business venture was even more pathetic than I'd suspected. He'd convinced our 73-year-old grandfather to invest $9,000 in his cryptocurrency trading scheme by promising guaranteed returns of 200% within 6 months. When the inevitable crash happened, Mike lost not only the entire investment, but an additional $3,000 of his own money. He was now working double shifts at the electronics store and had taken out multiple payday loans to try to pay back our grandfather before anyone in the family found out about the scam. But here's what made me genuinely angry. While all of them were drowning in debt and facing serious financial consequences for their irresponsible decisions, they'd spent months planning an elaborate intervention to kick me out of the house because I was supposedly the family's financial burden and source of shame. I was literally the only person in the entire family with substantial savings, 0 debt, a stable income, and a clear plan for financial independence. Yet somehow, I was the problem that needed to be fixed. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. My dad's secretary mentioned during a casual conversation that my parents had been systematically asking various family members for loans over the past several months, always claiming the money was needed for business expansion opportunities or temporary cash flow issues. Several relatives had already lent them money that would obviously never be repaid. "Your mom called me yesterday asking if I knew anyone who might be interested in renting a room in their house," she told me. She said they were looking for additional income sources to help with some financial challenges. That's when I finally understood the real motivation behind the intervention. They desperately needed my room to rent out for extra income to help cover their mortgage payments. The 60-day ultimatum wasn't about motivating me to improve my life. It was about getting me out of the house as quickly as possible so they could monetize my living space. But they couldn't just kick out their adult son without some kind of moral justification that would make them look like responsible parents, rather than desperate people exploiting their own child. So, they created this elaborate intervention scenario to make it appear they were helping me while actually helping themselves. I was having lunch with my new supervisor to discuss my start date when she mentioned that the company was looking for someone to take over management of a major client relationship that had become available unexpectedly. It would require significantly more responsibility and some travel, but the position paid $98,000 base salary plus performance bonuses. "You impressed everyone during the interview process," she said. "We think you could handle the additional challenge, and it would put you on a fast track for senior management within 2 years." I accepted the position immediately. Suddenly, I wasn't just meeting their demands, I was absolutely crushing them. $98,000 base salary, company car allowance, expense account for client entertainment, and a clear pathway to 6-figure earnings within 2 years. I was going to make more money than anyone in my family except Brandon, and his income was mostly debt-financed illusion. Anyway, that's when Uncle Bob inadvertently gave me the idea that would change everything and provide the perfect opportunity for poetic justice. Uncle Bob called me about 2 weeks before my family's 60-day ultimatum was set to expire. He'd been thinking about the intervention and was increasingly uncomfortable with how everything had been handled. "Danny, I've been reflecting on that family meeting and something really doesn't feel right about the whole situation. Your parents asked me to help motivate and support you, not to threaten and humiliate you in front of everyone. I told him about my new job and the $98,000 salary, and he was genuinely excited and proud of my success. That's fantastic news. You should call your parents right away and share the good news with everyone. I'm planning to wait until the deadline expires. Let them worry about whether I'll actually meet their requirements." That's when Uncle Bob mentioned something that opened up an entirely new possibility for my response strategy. "You know, your dad came to me last week asking for a substantial loan. He said the business was having temporary cash flow issues, and he needed $25,000 to cover payroll and essential expenses. Did you lend him the money? Absolutely not. I lent him money 3 years ago that he never paid back, and I'm not making that mistake again. But Danny, if he's desperate enough to ask me for money, the situation must be really dire. Uncle Bob runs a very successful electrical contracting business and has always been regarded as the most financially successful person in our extended family. If my dad was approaching him for loans, it meant the situation was beyond desperate. What if there was a way to help them while also making a point about how they treated me?" I asked. "What do you mean?" That's when I explained the plan that had been forming in my mind. It was admittedly petty and calculating, but it was also poetic justice that would address the real problem, while providing them with a solution. Uncle Bob's business was successful enough that he'd been actively looking for real estate investment opportunities to diversify his holdings. What if instead of simply lending my dad money that would never be repaid, we created a solution that would save my parents' house, while also fundamentally changing the power dynamic in our relationship? "I've got $34,000 in savings that I was planning to use for a house down payment," I told him. "You've got business connections with banks and real estate investors. What if we found a way to purchase my parents' mortgage debt?" Uncle Bob was quiet for a long time while he thought through the implications. "Danny, that's actually a brilliant business strategy. If they're in default and facing foreclosure, the bank would probably be willing to sell the mortgage at a significant discount to avoid the costs and complications of the foreclosure process." We spent the next week researching the process and working out the financial details. My parents currently owed $190,000 on their house, but they were in default, and the foreclosure process had already begun. The bank would likely accept $150,000 to transfer the mortgage and avoid the legal costs, time delays, and potential losses connected with foreclosure, auction, and resale. Between my savings and Uncle Bob's investment capital, we could easily acquire the debt and essentially become my parents' new landlords instead of their son and brother-in-law. But Danny, Uncle Bob warned me, this is a nuclear option. Once you do something like this, there's no possibility of returning to normal family relationships. This will permanently change everything. Uncle Bob, they humiliated me in front of 26 people with a PowerPoint presentation about my failures. Then they gave me an ultimatum based on complete lies about their own financial situation. Normal family relationships ended 2 months ago. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and justice. We would acquire their mortgage through Uncle Bob's investment company, which was a completely legal and standard business transaction. My parents could continue living in the house, but they would be making monthly payments to us instead of to the bank. We would charge them fair market rent, which would actually be lower than their current mortgage payments and much more manageable given their financial situation. But here's the most satisfying part. They wouldn't know I was involved in the transaction until after all the papers were signed and the deal was completed. 3 days before my 60-day deadline, I received a text message from my mom. "Danny, your 60 days are almost up. Have you managed to find a job that meets our requirements?" I didn't respond. The next day, Jessica sent me a message. Hope you're prepared to apologize for how you acted during our family meeting. Mom and Dad might be willing to give you another chance if you ask nicely and show that you've learned something. The day before the deadline, Mike actually called me. Dude, just get any job and tell them it pays $75,000. They'll never actually check your salary, and you can buy yourself time to figure out something better. That's when I knew they had absolutely no idea what was coming, and had learned nothing from their own financial disasters. The final family meeting was scheduled for Sunday at 2 p.m., exactly 60 days after the original intervention. I showed up wearing a brand new suit I'd bought specifically for job interviews and driving a rental car instead of my usual beaten-up Honda Civic. The same 26 people were there, although this time the energy in the room was completely different. Instead of the hostile anticipation from 2 months earlier, there was an atmosphere of smug satisfaction. They clearly thought they had won, and I was about to admit defeat. My dad stood up with his manila folder again, obviously prepared for what he expected to be my surrender speech. Danny, your 60 days are officially up. Do you have a job offer that meets our family's requirements? I pulled out my phone and showed them the employment contract displayed clearly on the screen. Senior financial analyst position, $98,000 base salary, company car allowance, full benefits package, and performance bonuses. My start date is tomorrow morning. The room went completely silent. Jessica's face went pale. Mike's mouth literally fell open. Several people looked confused, like they couldn't process what I just said. $98,000? My mom asked, clearly shocked. Plus bonuses and performance incentives. My total compensation should reach approximately $115,000 in the first year. My dad was struggling to process this information. That's excellent, Danny. We knew you had the potential to succeed if you just applied yourself properly. No, I said firmly. You didn't believe I could succeed. You made a PowerPoint presentation about my failures and threatened to disown me. You never had faith in my abilities. You just needed me out of this house for your own financial reasons. What are you talking about? Jessica asked defensively. That's when I pulled out my own laptop and connected it to their television, just like they had done to me 2 months earlier. Since you enjoyed presentations so much, I prepared one for you. It's titled The Real Family Crisis, a comprehensive analysis of financial irresponsibility and deception. Slide 1, Jessica and Brandon's complete debt-to-income analysis, including screenshots of her Instagram posts showing purchases they obviously couldn't afford on their actual income. Slide 2, Mike's cryptocurrency scam and the detailed breakdown of money he had stolen from our grandfather under false pretenses. Slide 3, Dad's business bankruptcy timeline and documentation of the imminent repossession of his equipment due to unpaid loans. Slide 4, my parents' mortgage default situation and the foreclosure proceedings that were already underway. Slide 5, a comprehensive list of family members who had been approached for loans under false pretenses with dates and amounts. What I still don't understand, I said, looking around the room, is how you managed to convince 26 people to participate in humiliating me when every single one of you is in worse financial condition than I've ever been in my entire life. Jessica was crying now, but they were tears of embarrassment and anger rather than sadness. Danny, you don't understand the kind of pressure we're all dealing with right now. No, Jessica, you don't understand pressure. Pressure is being ambushed by your entire family and told you're a failure when you're actually the most financially responsible and stable person in the room. That's when Uncle Bob stood up and pulled out a folder of legal documents. Danny, should I tell them about the other recent development? Please do. Uncle Bob opened his folder and addressed the room formally. 2 days ago, my investment company successfully acquired the mortgage on this property from First National Bank. The previous homeowners had defaulted on their payments, and we purchased the debt at a significant discount to fair market value. My dad's face went completely white. What exactly are you saying, Bob? I'm saying that you no longer owe First National Bank $190,000. You now owe us $150,000, and we are officially your landlords. The good news is that we're only going to charge you $1,300 per month in rent, which is substantially less than your previous mortgage payment. You can't do that to us, my mom said, her voice shaking. Actually, we can, and we did. It's a completely standard and legal real estate transaction that happens thousands of times every month across the country. The bank was happy to avoid the costs and complications of foreclosure, and we got a solid investment property. Jessica was sobbing now, finally understanding the implications. This is insane. You're destroying our family over money. I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. I'm solving problems that you created. You wanted me to make $75,000. I'm making $98,000. You wanted me to move out. I'm moving out this week. You wanted me to contribute financially to the family. I just saved your house from foreclosure and gave you a rent payment that you can actually afford. Mike finally found his voice. What do you want from us, Danny? I don't want anything from any of you, I replied. You made it crystal clear that I'm not truly part of this family unless I meet your arbitrary financial criteria. Well, now I exceed those criteria by a substantial margin. But our relationship has been permanently changed by your actions. I packed up my laptop and headed toward the door. Danny, wait, my mom called out desperately. We can work this out as a family. We can fix this. I turned around one final time. You were right about one thing in your presentation. I did need to grow up and become financially independent.